Hello and good afternoon, good evening, everyone, from wherever you're joining us from. Welcome to the GameUp Africa September edition of the Meetup. This is where we come together as game developers, game artists, people in audio, and also people who are curious about what the game industry is and what your role can be in this industry. We come together and we invite an expert who has gone through the journey and will share insights on some of the things that you are interested and keen on. Let's have a look at what we are anticipating for our September meetup today. What to expect. We all know about the game that we are making at Maliyo Games. It's a March 3 renovation game that features popular African cities and the African culture and the construction that power a game like this. So we're going to be looking behind that code. What is the tech stack that has been used to build a game like this? Micheal is the lead game engineer at Maliyo Games. And afterwards, we'll be followed by Nicole Gesare, who will be showcasing a March mini game that she built as part of the Elite GameUp Africa program, which is a Maliyo Games externship program for outstanding GameUp Africa participants to come back and learn how to create games and work in teams to develop games. So we hope you have fun during this session. Note down all the questions that you have as Micheal and Nicole speak, and then we'll be taking them at the end of the session. So on to our first speaker, Micheal. Micheal is a game developer and the lead game engineer at Maliyo Games with over 7 years of experience in the games industry. Micheal led the engineering team for Disney Iwájú, Rising Chef, a game that marked Maliyo Games as the first African developer to collaborate with Walt Disney Company games. If you haven't played it, go to Play Store, go to App Store and get it and play to know what the experience is like. Under Micheal's leadership, the team has published games with over 100,000 players across Apple and Google Play stores. Micheal is what you'd also call a prolific game jam freak. Micheal has participated in over 23 game jams, and if you can battle him out, mention that in the chat. If you have actually participated in over 20 game jams, and some of those include GMTK, Ludum Dare, and Global Game Jam. This has also earned him a recognition as a finalist in the Digital Lab Africa competition, where he secured second place in the Nigerian Game Development Showcase. His portfolio includes diverse titles such as Whot King, Oga Rush, and Mama Atingi Shop. Beyond development, Micheal is passionate about nurturing African talent in game development, and he has served as a Unity student ambassador. He has led training programs for aspiring developers and has created frameworks to guide engineering processes at Maliyo Games. And this is what we're going to be covering today. So if you look at Safari City from a developer standpoint and you start to realize the narrative system, the ad system, the monetization system, the core gameplay, the meta game, how do these things come together and what powers them to make a robust and optimized game? So let us have a look behind the curtain. And as we welcome help me in join me in welcoming Micheal Fagbemi to share with us the code and the tech stack behind Safari City. Welcome, Micheal.
Hello, hello, welcome. Thanks for the introduction. Nice to meet everyone. Yeah, so I'm guessing that I can get started.
Go for it.
Okay, okay. Hi everyone. Welcome to this the talking about the tech behind Safari City. So I'm just gonna quickly, just basically inspire you and basically give you all the things we think about, all the things we do while working on a game like this. So let's just do a quick introduction. I think Dorothy has already done the great introduction already, but just a quick how I introduce myself. I'm the lead engineer at Maliyo. I've been working at Maliyo for over 5 years now. I've been into development for roughly 7 to 8 years now. I do love game jams. Have made be participating in over 20 game jams, and in the slide there you will notice these are a couple of other games that I have published, and I also have many, many more dead projects sitting in my Unity hub. Hopefully, that will give you enough confidence. Like, hey, I know what I'm talking about a bit, and yeah, hopefully, I'll kind of show you what we do at Maliyo Games. Yeah. So, what is Safari City for anybody? Ideally, you should know what it is, but it's a match three mini renovation game. This game you basically you play mastery levels, you renovate the city, you interact with cool characters, you play cool puzzles, and it's basically a game meant for Africans, built by Africans, and it's something that we're really proud of in the company. So what is our game engine of choice? Obviously we're using Unity 6 as our game engine of choice, and you might ask like why Unity? So basically for Unity, apart from it being the most popular choice for the mobile game industry, and also is what the team is built and familiarized with, I think there are a couple of things that Unity does that I feel no other engine is able to do at that scale. Um, and one of the major things which I kind of like highlighted here, one of those major things is the iOS and Android development cycle. So it's really easy for you to iterate really quickly using Unity for both iOS and Android, in which other people you might struggle. And it's kind of like built for that. The workflow is kind of like built for something like that. And then also it helps you create tools that ease the workflow, right? Because each think of Unity as this huge sandbox, right? And in this sandbox, you want to kind of like you can build almost any game you think of, right? And Unity basically can bend and mold to what game you want to build, whether it's 2D, whether it's 3D, whether it's a puzzle, whether it's an action game, right? It's one of those engines that can mold into whatever you want, whether it's hyper casual. You can mold into those kind of like those tools. So what you want to do, the beauty of Unity is the ability to be able to create different tools that basically ease your workflow, right? You want to have that in mind. So basically, and I'll be showing you a little bit of those workflows, basically of those tools and the workflows and what we do while building a game like this. It might give you a very good insight into how we use the engine and also the kind of tools we kind of create, because these tools quite tricky to make, but kind of like help you grow and help you work really fast compared to if you are just doing it manually by hand. So quickly, let's just quickly jump into so let's talk about mastery levels, right? So the beauty about mastery levels is that um we have tools that help us create handcrafted levels, right? So it's a very big window with a very with different grids and everything, and you can manually place items, what spawns, what is the objective, and all that really cool things. Something that the team basically created to help the designers basically design really interesting levels. And then also extending from that, we're also able to use an algorithm to generate new levels. So basically, okay, can we generate a new level for difficulty, for okay, an easy level, a hard level, based on different objectives, based what kind of stars you want to do. So basically, that combination, you don't want to stick to just one type of tool. You basically want to be able to stick to multiple tools where you want to have both like handcrafted that feels very unique, and also have random generated levels that also feel that would help ease the work from your designer. Your designers can go in there, tweak one or two values here and there, but that's how we bring our beautiful matrix system to life, and it's still under iteration. It's something we're really proud of. Propriety we work on currently. So that's one of the things we do in Maliyo. We kind of create these tools for mastery levels. One other thing also you need to be aware of is for the mastery levels, kind of like use the we make sure everything is hosted on the cloud. So this is something for aspiring devs. When you are building a game that is going to be this big, that's going to last for this long amount of time, you want to be able to iterate really fastly in case there's any issue, difficulty issue, if there's any issue with the game, the level not working or something like that. You want to be able to have everything on cloud. And basically, what we have is that we have a system for basically once the level has been created or has been tweaked, we can upload it to the cloud and then get downloaded into the phone, right? So even while we're testing, we basically say, hey, we can change it from okay hard to difficulty. We can check, hey, are people falling off at this level? Are people losing at this other level? And we can basically tweak those numbers, right? And this is something that's also quite interesting because like you want to have that degree of control while doing like mastery, right? While doing your levels, right? Because some players might find what you find easy, some players might find hard, right? And it's easy and it's good for you to have those tools that basically the less the user has to download on the store, the better for you, right? So for example, when it comes to the game and they say that usually the game should be at around like 200 MB plus, but we don't do that, right? So the game currently sits around like 100 and something, I think 105 or 110, but that depends on the phone you're using. But then usually big and the amount of content in the game is helped by the amount of stuff we have in the cloud, right? You want to have that in mind while you're making a game that is this complex, and has this huge amount of content. So I want to quickly go into our renovation. So in our renovation, you can see that we have the before and the after. So this is like one of the very core loops of our game. If you play the game, you would realize that we have both the before and the after. And I want to kind of like give you like an insight into how we make this like beautiful, complex buildings, right? I want to give you a very small insight into that. Okay. So first of all, we have a sprite library. So this sprite library basically, after it's been exported out, after it's been done by the artist, we have it in this huge library of all the individual elements, right? And each of these individual elements is actually quite important for you to start doing your rigging, right? So rigging, I guess if you guys know what rigging means, right? Basically putting up bones, right? You want to put on anchors on each of your building objects, right? And what that basically helps us to do is that helps you to make really really cool animations that you wouldn't get otherwise, right? And we can have these very complex buildings because not to forget, Safari City is about the buildings. It's about how complex the buildings, and we want to have a system that scales. If you want to have a simple building, so if you play the game, the first building very simple, very few moving parts. The second building has way more buildings, and then you want to kind of like want to scale up again, and you want to have we're going to have way more complex parts. So in other episodes there are way more complex parts. So in this kind of way we kind of like have a bit of performance, plus we also have like a bit of control, right? You want to have that in mind when you're making like a game like this. And these are systems and tools that we kind of like um that hard to, I won't say hard to grasp, but basically, yeah, it's also very laborious. So we also have tools that can like make this process very, very easy, right? We have designed tools. If you try to do this yourself, you would notice that, wow, this is a lot of work, right? Because we're basically creating a building from scratch, right? And we're inputting into the game, and they have to look good, and also they have to like act and behave good, and player needs to have choice, right? So you need different tools that you can make that can help you design this. So you have an auto rigging process, you have an auto naming tool, you have a tool that helps you automatically sort stuff into the sprite library and stuff like that. So it just, that's what the beauty of Unity, and what we have been able to do with it is we're able to capitalize it to its maximum. So we can able to, these are stuff that we wouldn't imagine Africans doing. I won't say just say African, but these are complex projects that we would be scared of doing. But making this type of tools, it means that we can actually approach complex games like this. So talking about on that same light, right? Most of our shop, our economy are all hosted on the cloud, and they are being inputted into the user. And this gets apparent over time. So, for example, now we've noticed a difference between the Nigerian player and US players. So they all have different pricings, and they have different values based on, okay, how well are you doing the game and stuff like that. And this also applies to, let's say, hey, our economy, right? So the daily bonus is just a good example, or our events, right? Most of them are hosted on the cloud, means we can enable them, disable them, um, change the values that you get, right? And this is like a very good way for us to go like in be very reactive. So if you know how long it takes, right? How long it takes to basically make a game and upload it to the store, how long that process takes, it takes a very long time, right? And ideally you want to kind of like short that time. So in case there's an issue, or you notice you want to be reactive to, so if certain users are saying, hey, this is too small, you want to be reactive to stuff like that, right? So ideally most of your data should be hosted on the cloud. So you obviously can't do this with art assets. You can do it with art assets, but there are some limitations. But ideally most of your values and most of your numbers, so you need to be more reactive, focus on the cloud, and then get imported into the phone, right? So let's just quickly go talk about our UI. So a very pretty UI. One of those top UI out there. Um, so let's just quickly talk about how UI. So one of the major things we do is that we have a sprite atlas. So what that basically means is that the sprite atlas is it's a way for you to reduce the amount of draw calls and reduce the amount of basically and basically optimize the game. So you'll have your performance improve, so the games run faster on smaller phones.
Michael, there is some tampering with your mic.
You can't hear me?
Try again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, much clearer. Go on.
Okay. So you want to be aware of those different like stuff. So you're not just implementing, you're not just taking stuff and just throwing to the game, right? You want to be aware of the kind of devices that your phone is going to run for. I need to optimize for stuff like that, right? So having like a sprite atlas for optimization, right? Making sure the icons are not that big, making sure that you know when or not to disable your try filter on your sprites, right? Having those, because of sprites are usually the biggest thing in the game. You want to have to find optimize it, and when you have a audience, right? Like we are targeting Nigerians. None of us have data on our a lot of data, right? We want to make sure we want to reduce it as much as possible. So this is one way we can like use um kind of like find a way to make sure that we're not replicating so much assets, right? We're not replicating too much assets. Make sure that okay, everything's optimized. can a button be also using line slicing? Okay, can your button be used in different ways, right? Those are those little things we think about while we're making a game like this, because we're kind of like appealing to a wide audience, right? A very, very wide audience, and you want to make sure you appeal to all of them. So one of the other thing also needs to be okay. I'm sorry, go back. Okay, so we have code-based animation. So if you play the game, you notice a lot of really cool animation. And one of the interesting things to note is that most of our animations are usually very code-based. We're using a twinning library, and this is a good standard practice in general, because you want to make sure that like it's optimized, right? And it's also very flexible, right? We can apply the same animation to different items without any restriction on names, without any restriction on type of components, right? I know if you're using the normal Unity animation system, you have to make sure the name is the same, and also it's not also fully optimized. I know there have been some changes over the years, but like it's not fully optimized for Android, for basically for mobile devices, or just basically in general, right? Making sure your UI animations are code based, so using a twinning library. So there are many different twinning libraries you can use a collection of them, but ideally you want to have the artist's vision in mind while keeping everything very, very pretty, right? And also making sure it scales over time, so you can apply the same animation to 1 million, 10 pop-ups, 50 pop-ups, 100 pop-ups, right? When you think of games in this scale, you don't understand the amount of like when you start thinking of those in numbers, you need to think about the processes, right? If you're doing one thing 50 times, it needs to be efficient. If you're doing one thing 100 times, it needs to be even way more efficient. It can be like a one button click, right? So right now we can add a new animation to a new pop-up or a new button, right? And it works fine, right? It works fine. It's scalable, right? If you can check the game, or they're not different animations in different places, everything all works scaled, and it's also very performant. So those are the things that we can like do when it comes to keeping make sure our UI is kind of like world class and kind of like competing with our various competitors. Those are like one of the two things to keep the size of the game. And I think also something to point out is that we have your normal animation frameworks, the size of the game will get increased, because you would need individual animations for each individual like pop-up, and that when you have 100 different types of pop-ups, 100 different kind of buttons, 100 different kind of screens, it actually scales almost exponentially. You won't realize it until your game is like 1 gig, or like what happened, right? For when you're making games like this, you want to keep it as small as possible. So let's just quickly go into, so another thing also is the UI. So when it comes to the on the UI is the onboarding and the tutorials, right? So when it comes to the people tend to forget how much work goes into stuff like this. So for example, making sure that the screen is darkened and only one thing is showing and you're unable to click on anything outside, right? You want to put all those few things in mind while creating it. Also making sure that the tutorial also basically matches your what the player is currently seeing at the moment, what they are doing, right? And what different conditions are happening, right? So these are just little things we can like do to make sure that the experience is good. And you want to have that in mind that when you are building games like something like this, you have to put all of those into consideration, right? Okay, for my own body tutorials, are they able to click outside? Are they able to only see what is required to be seen, right? So you want to have that in mind generally. So one other thing to be aware of is cross-platform issues. So these are the things that when you are making a game that trying to serve both Android and iOS, on even just on Android, there are multiple things you need to be aware of while making games like that. So one thing to be aware of is tablet scaling, right? So what I have on my screen here is I have two different screens, right? So this is tablet, this is Android, and they're the same screen, right? Ideally, uh, usually it's usually very difficult to make sure they're the same size. So you want to be constantly checking between tablet and normal screens that they are the same, they kind of like fit the vision, right? So for example, now on tablet, the icons might be smaller than the ones bigger. It makes sure that nothing you're able to see all the icons individually. It fits the vision of the artist, right? And another thing you should be aware of is your safe area. So I when it comes to safe areas are those like newer phones have what we call notches, and they have like part of the screen that's not really a screen that blocks the screen. I think obviously Unity and technologies have anticipated for screens like that, but you as a programmer, you have to be aware of stuff like that. Like, hey, I need to make sure that everything is being fit in a safe area. So basically, everything here, when you say safe area, basically everything in this area is not going to be covered by a a phone accessory like the notch now, or a dynamic island, or the curves, right? You want to make sure everything is fit within that safe area. So that's something you need to be aware of while um, we are basically making games like this, right? For all screen devices, right? This is where your phone will be played by people with small screens, people with big screens, right? And obviously our game is landscape. If it was landscape and portrait, it would be a more difficult challenge to solve, right? But usually games stick to just only one orientation, right? So that's one of the few things we can like put in consideration while we are making a game like this for for users. Yeah. So let's talk about our dev cycle. So when we work at Maliyo Games, we basically have a process, and this process here is what we use at Maliyo Games, kind of like to make sure the devs, as everybody who's programming, has a framework. And this is a cheat code, right? You won't find this anywhere. Giving it to you guys, right? So first things first, in the dev cycle, you have a task board, whether it's in Trello, Jira, Hack and Plan, um, Google Sheets, right? Whatever you use to track a task, right? Ideally, during the cycle, you want to check the task, right? So that's the very basic one, right? So this is something that we do every. This is a standard practice, right? And then you want to pick the most urgent tasks to work on, right? So while you're working on stuff, you don't want to go and work on a low priority task because you find it more fun. If something is urgent and you've classified it by degree of prioritization, you want to make sure you're working on the most urgent thing at the moment, right? It's either it's a game breaking bug, it's a critical bug, it's a critical feature that's going into the next update. You need to be aware of that, and you need to pick that up, right? Because devs have autonomy, but these are like the guiding steps into what task you pick next. So next thing, when you pick a task, you need to be sure you understand what is required. When you move from you're working with a big team like ours, we have 35 plus in our team. When you're working big, you need to understand that like you know everything that's required for this task that needs to be done, right? Whether it's a match three task, it's a new screen, it's a new feature, right? You need to make sure that you are in sync with the artists, sync with the animators, sync with the project manager, sync with the project owner, right? You need to be aware that you understand it, right? So once you're sure that you looked at it. For example, let's make a new mini game about swimming, right? Just a random example, right? Meaning about swimming, right? Okay, what does it mean? How many characters will be in the scene, right? Is it a 3D game or a 2D game, right? Is it is are you expecting long loading times or short loading times? What is acceptable? So you need to ask those questions. Those questions are very, very important. You ask yourself and ask the team, so you don't go and build something else that nobody is agreeing on, right? And the next thing you also do is that you need to make sure before you jump into coding, you need to build a robust design. And when I mean robust design, I mean that you create your UML diagram, you create your flow charts, right? So from the okay, that's weird. Okay, so basically from the concept of you basically have to be from a programming concept phase, you need to make sure you have a design, right? Whether it's a class UML or is a basic flowchart, you need to make sure that you have a very basic design. And then you show up with your whether your lead dev or your whole team in general. You want to show it off and say, hey, this I'm thinking of implementing this new feature, or have this class, or have this data will be hosted here, data will be hosted here, and make sure that like you are not looking at the design in an isolated environment, right? Because don't forget, you're in a big team, right? You're in a team. you don't want to have an isolated look into things, right? So basically making sure that, oh, hey, the design is robust, make sure that, hey, the design accommodates for any features, make sure it's also scalable, right? Think of scalability, right? Hey, to do 100 different types of this design. How easy can we do that, right? You need to put that in mind. And before you jump into code, right, you need to, like, I think something we need to be more aware of is that, like, your superpower when it comes to programming, it's not really the writing code, right? Writing code is the easy part. The hard part is thinking about the architecture, right? How everything is being framed and how everything is being connected to each other, right? One of those practices you try to do on almost every new feature we're making, right? And try to like have and also think about the player and also think about the needs of the team, right? So if the team says, hey, we don't want this feature anymore, can we disable it remotely? If the team says, hey, this feature is too slow, can we have a toggle? Is it easy for you to change the speed of things? Is it easy for you to change the difficulty of things? You need to have that already planned out, right? Already somewhere, and then show it off, have a peer review session, and then before you start coding, right? So you start coding, you work on the task, you work in Unity, you work in whatever engine you're using, and then you have a minor QA. So I call this a minor QA. So basically, you have a video of your feature working from start to finish, and then you share it with your lead, with your project manager or with the team, right? And you basically just confirm that, hey, this is working as expected. We can all see the edge cases, right? So usually in dev work, most of the work you do is invincible, right? So if you're working on, let's say, a save and load system, most of the work is invisible, right? But you want to kind of like show the visible parts. No matter how invisible your work is, there is a visible part that the user would interact with, right? So, or user would notice or would not notice, right? So you want to have a video that highlights that, hey, look at, I have this sort of like, I created this feature, right? And this is how it looks, this is how I feel. And they can give you feedback, right? Without needing to, let's say, make a new build, because making a build can take time, right? You already have your feature out there in the world. You can only get feedback as fast as possible, right? So that's something you have to be aware of. And then also, you want to be able to move the tax, move your tax into your tax box, or check your tax box off again. And don't forget to take rest, right? We devs, we can work for a very long time. So one thing you should realize is you need to take rest between tasks, right? So that is a curtain. I just basically showed you a small window into how we work at Maliyo Games, how we are.
Hi, Michael. Your mic is having issues again. We can't hear you.
Oh, that's not good.
Yeah, you're back. You're back now.
Okay. Let me. Okay, I should be audible right now. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, okay. All right. So I'm done with the presentation. Any questions? Or
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Michael, for drawing the curtains back and sharing some of the tech stack that you're using in Safari City, as well as the considerations that you're making with your audience, with your development team, and how it has come into effect in the final game. So let's have any questions that we have for Michael. You can put them in the chat, and then Michael will answer them.
okay.
Okay, Dreamrad has questions. As he types his questions, and for everybody else who is typing the questions, Michael, you've put this out, you put the game out a while back, and you've been getting feedback from players, right? So given the feedback that you have received, I'm curious to know if there is any comment you've gotten, especially from your players, that has made you rethink some of the tech stack that you had decided on at the beginning when you were deciding the project architecture?
Yeah, so ideally, I showed you that most of our code is also on the cloud, right? So what we have done is that we've made the game smaller for people for the initial download, but there's a side to that. We have causing comment that the game does take a bit of data because we have to still download all of that, right? So which is something that we didn't even think about or fully acknowledge while we are building, right? So this idea of like, hey, you have a smaller game, the game is smaller, right? You download it, and later you see how it's like, let's say, 100 MB or 200 MB of stuff to download because there's just so much content to download, right? This is ideally the practice in the industry, but that's something that like we have been rethinking and been wondering like, should we have like breaks or basically when do we download stuff on the user's device? Do we download it later? Do we download it sooner? Right? So that's kind of like I guess I will answer the question of like what's one comment we've received that we are rethinking the way we kind of like download stuff on your device. Yeah.
All right. And on the same on optimization, how do you optimize, especially for data usage? Because if you consider the African audience, most people will be using data as opposed to Wi-Fi. So how do you make sure that your game is optimized in terms of data usage?
So ideally, the how you do that is making sure what the user has to download is usually very small and compressed, and then you uncompress it, right? So you want to make sure that the way to optimize with data usage just makes sure okay, what the player has to download is very small. So we have compression algorithms like that for a couple of years. You can use that, right? And just making sure that okay, what the player installs, what the player uses data to download is actually very small, right? So I do show you stuff like UI optimization with atlases and stuff like that. You can't do that for even if you're using like normal Unity addressables. There is how much of compression you can actually do, right? Even though there's a little bit of limits to how much you can compress, but you can't compress a lot. I think that's one of the ways that we widely use like ways. And then like the other one I showed you about is like staggering it. So basically you don't download everything all at once. You download it at different intervals to make sure the user actually cares about the game fully before they start downloading all the content required. Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you. We have our questions now. Dreamrad is asking, the game's 2D or 3D? He got confused at some point.
Oh, so it is 2D. The game is completely 2D. So it looks 3D because we are taking a render 3D. So the houses are initially 3D, but they are rendered in 2D. And that is how so the game is actually 2D. When you look at the game, we're all using sprites. There's no models, so yeah, it's 2D.
Okay, we have Christopher who's asking, how important is it to think about scalability when you're building a feature?
It's very, very important. It's probably the most important thing when you're making a live service game like this. So if you're making a game that is just throw away, that you're making like for Steam that you never touch again, then you probably don't care, right? But you're making a live service game that has to get updated constantly while it's in people's hands. You need to think about scalability. It's one of the most important things you need to think about, right? How will this feature scale if you have 1 million users? How will this feature scale if you have to do it 100 times? Will it get very annoying? If you can optimize that process to even like one less click, one less button click, you have saved yourself like so much time, right? Because when you're working on the game, you're constantly iterating on one feature. So yeah, scalability is very important here.
Okay, we have Glenn. He's asking about cross-platform games. Has there been a situation where you've had to touch native code?
Not really. Usually, Unity kind of like blocks you away from most of that. There is one or two situations where you have to touch it, but usually you don't really have to. So if you really want some native feature that doesn't exist anywhere else, then definitely you would have to touch native code. A good example off the top of my head right now is working with Android. If you wanted to have a native Android feature, like let's say a native Android feature, like say the native Android pop-ups, ideally you would need that. But there is a way for you to actually connect it. So you have a DLL file, you load that into Unity, but most of the time you don't have to touch native code at all. Even in iOS, even if you're using Xcode, you're not really touching it. You're not actually touching native code, right? All has been converted to native code for you, and then you make a build, right? So ideally, you don't really have to touch native code now. Thank you. So that's it.
Okay. Dreamred has another question. You mentioned on making sure that you satisfy all players. Did you mean by gameplay or accessibility?
I mean accessibility, not gameplay. So when it comes to gameplay, suffice it is for a set of audience, not for everybody. You can't satisfy everybody. But in that audience, you want to make sure that it works on most devices, even on lower end devices, that people that are using 1 gig RAM and people that are using like 10 gig RAM or 8 gig RAM, right? You want to make sure your phone can like game you are building kind of like works on that, right? So you don't lose much of those users. So I mean accessibility and not gameplay.
All right. Chris is asking, what do you think about the build first, polish later approach that is common when you want to get something done quickly?
That's a very valid way of working. So people you build first, you polish later. Ideally, you want to make sure that the concept does what you need it to do, and then you polish it. The issue I have noticed is that polish later doesn't almost happen, which will lead to tech debt and will lead to problems down the way, right? So if you are following that line of thinking, which is usually industry standard, you have a rough build, and then like you put that out there, or you have that feature in the game, right? There is a tricky part. So usually what I try to do the best is I try to make sure it's polished 50% out of the way. It's not too much where it's not too much where I lose a lot of time, but also not too little that so in case polishing doesn't happen, you would have to, let's say it would be way bad for you. So it should be around 50%. I know that's an arbitrary number, but ideally you want to have it just okay enough, right? You don't want to have like you just want to be aware that we're working in a fast-paced environment. You want to have something quickly done. There is a very high tendency of you never touching that thing ever again, right? There is a very high tendency of you, and let's not forget the reality of this. This is a constant issue in the programming space in general. This is not just to game development, right? So you want to make sure that, hey, you have the feature out there, it works, and then you polish. But you want to have it 50% because the person who hired you doesn't really care about polish. They just care about it working first, right? But you know that in the future, this will come to hurt you. That's why it's called tech debt, right? It's a debt. You have basically said, I've pushed it to the future, right? And when the future comes, you want you to pay for it. So make sure that it's like 50%-ish, it's fast enough. But if you want to scale in the future, you can basically, it will be easy. It'll be easy to polish. But just have that in mind. Reality and expectation doesn't really align, but just have that in mind in general. Yeah.
All right. Harry is asking, how do you handle gameplay camera size between tablet and phone to maintain it in the safe area along the UI scaling?
So there's two ways of doing this. So first of all, you have, when it comes to UI, there is a way where you can scale. You want to be able to scale the UI based on the screen size. So in Unity, it's called a canvas scaler. That's what the component is called, right? And this canvas scaler basically helps you scale the devices based on your reference size. So you build the game with a reference size, and then it automatically scales based on your width. So whether you prioritize width or prioritize height, or you prioritize either of the both, right? Also, when it comes to camera size, so the question says camera size, right? So that's a completely different type of ball game. So we have a tool in the game, or in most of our games, that basically locks the camera to a particular height. So no matter you're using tablets or using Android, height or width, right? We can lock the game to a particular height or width, right? So it means that for bigger devices, you might have more space you might have more width, but locks heights, or you might have a more height and locks width. So making that decision is important based on the game. But usually when it comes to camera size, you want to kind of like lock it. So just basically you want to lock it. So basically when I say locking, I just mean that you're scaling the camera size based on the screen to make sure the height or the width is always locked. You can't have both of them, you can only have one. And then from there, you can now build your assets. You can build your backgrounds. You can build your art based on that, right? So if you are creating art, you create more on the width and less on the height. So yeah.
Okay, awesome. We're going to take these last 3 questions before we move on to the next part of the meetup. Glenn is asking, is Safari City playable offline, or at least to some extent? And if so, how do you manage synchronization between local changes and the cloud?
So it is offline. Ideally, it is offline. So it's offline and both offline. So the first time you log in, you have to be online, and then later it's offline. You can play it offline. Ideally, this is a basic requirement for most of our games at Maliyo. You have to be able to play it offline because it's not every time you have good network connection, right? So for synchronization, so we do have a pop-up in the game once it gets locked, right? So this is standard practice. Once you notice that there's a huge disparity between the local change and the cloud changes, you want to have a pop-up that basically says, hey, we noticed that you have these 2 different types of versions. So you have one at this time, you have one on the local change, you have one at this time, on the cloud change, you have one at this time. Choose which one, right? And the player will choose which one they find is the more recent one, right? So hey, I was playing before I was offline, so I'm choosing the offline version, or choosing like the online version, right? So usually in games, if you've noticed, if you play on a different device and you jump on a new device and it doesn't sync up, there's a way that you can kind of like, you get that pop-up, right? Basically get that choice to choose. So usually it's left up to the players. We do some of our own backend if we can kind of like see, okay, for example, now, if you're on level 5 here and you're on level 10, if you're level 5 on the local and you're level 10 in the cloud, we just move you up to level 10, right? Move you up to the local. There are some smaller things you can do that doesn't require it. But if the disparity is too much, you just let the player choose. That's the industry standard. You let the player choose which one that they want. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Mohammed is asking, with the game getting bigger and bigger with each version, how do you structure your playtesting to ensure that it covers different features and aspects of the game?
Yeah, so this is a general problem. You just play test more. That's basically what it means. And you make sure you code in a way where stuff doesn't break while you're making new features, but the bigger the game, the bigger the playtest, right? We do have a playtest plan where we like have different things that each of the playtesters should check, and then they go through that. So with the bigger the game, the more the plan gets bigger, but usually that's just the way it is generally, right? The bigger the game, the more the playtesting. So yeah.
Okay, and lastly, from Dreamrad Games, please can you advise on AI? I know everyone is practically using it these days, but in terms of optimization, clean gameplay, what role has it played? How do you see it from the lens of a senior developer? Do you think it is wise to use it out the gate as a beginner, or when is it wise to adopt it? And then maybe can you rephrase this last question of his? What role has AI played in Safari City?
Okay. So it's still a very controversial topic when it comes to AI. People, I don't have anything to sell to you. If I had something to sell to you out there, hey, you know what? 100% of our code is generated by AI, but I don't have that. But from my role, I usually 80% of the code AI writes, I don't like it. So I wouldn't advise for a beginner to use AI out of the gate. It's a good way for you to help, right? But I wouldn't advise for you to rely on it as a beginner, right? Because there are some mistakes that you make that you won't have any idea, or there are some issues that you're finding. So the best framework I have when it comes to AI is that AI knows how to write code on a very on a modular level, so on a small level, but doesn't know how to fully architect code, right? So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you are in charge of your architecture, how each of the modules will come together, and you can use AI for the smaller parts. So a good example, you're making a game about let's say a game about, let's say, spraying cash to make money, right? So what you want to do is you want to have the different, so design where the classes will be, you know, the classes will be, so design them on a very modular level, and then design them on a big level. So how would everything be connected? And then you can probably use AI for the smaller code parts, right? Usually you want to make sure that so AI, as much as overhyped as it is, it still has a very small context windows for big games, right? When I mean context, it'll be like there is a limit to how much it can take. You can't just chuck it in and expect it to fix all your problems. That will not work, right? It might help in some cases where it comes to like refactoring. So all those boring tasks, like, hey, I want to change all the names of my variables, right? It can do that for you. Usually you can even do that yourself with, let's say, Control F2, Control H, Control R. You've renamed everything, but like where it has to some creative parts, it can help you with that. So some of those boring tasks, it can help with that 100%. You want to use it as a tool, not as a replacement, or not as a. Even the idea of it, the word co-pilot is wrong. It shouldn't be a co-pilot. It should be like a tool, right? Basically, it should be a tool, not really a co-pilot. So you want to kind of like find that is my own. Everybody has their own way of thinking about it, but just think about it. There is a context limit. You want to make sure that you still have those individual skills yourself. So as a beginner, I would just advise that you stay away from it unless you have really, really stuck and you can't find the solution anywhere else, right? Then you use it. And then you have like, because the worst thing for you to do is to have code that you cannot explain how it's connected or how it works. You need to be able to understand it. If there's a bug, there is no way you can know. And at some point, feeding it into the AI over and over and over again, it's going to stop working at some point, right? So, not really, I won't say stop working. I just mean like there's a certain limit, right? So you want to make sure that what makes you unique, what puts you way above, is that you as a human, you have huger context limits. You can have 1 million tabs open up in your brain, right? And you can think about all those things holistically, right? So you want to use the AI to help solve smaller parts while you solve the bigger parts. But also when shit hits the fan, sorry for my language, when shit hits the fan, you want to be able to know what has been written, right? You don't want to have, but knowing what has been written takes time. It takes time, to be honest. So knowing what has been written actually takes time. So you actually have to just, I would say, ditch it for a while, make 1 or 2 projects or 3 or 4 projects, do game jams. So most game jams, So most game jams basically they don't allow AI in most game jams. So what you want to do is like apply for those game jams, right? Make sure you're able to code from start to finish because when it comes to AI engineer, you want to be, how do I put it now? You cannot control the sheep if you are blind. I don't know, but you cannot control, you can't drive the car if you don't know how to drive a car. I don't know how to put it right. It's a car, definitely. So you need to know how to drive a car from start to finish. So that's why, like, for we senior devs, is like we're living like AI is like a blessing in a way, because we already know what to do, and if it's not going the right way, we can't tell it. For a beginner, you literally have no idea, right? You have zero idea what you are doing, right? And it's code. Code is way more costly, right? I've had situations where, like, hey, what am I looking at here? You can almost tell, right? Because of the decision the person take. You want to be able to make the decisions yourself, right? And then, like, get to a point where, like, you know what? I'm willing to give out this task, right? Yeah. So yeah, that's my take on it.
Very amazing take on AI. Now, Michael, before we let you go, you've been in the industry for more than 7 years. You have done more than 23 game jams. And I want to understand what excites you the most about the African games industry.
I think what's exciting the most is, I think I'll put it in two ways. The first one is just the wave of innovation that would happen. So what that means is that for the longest time, I'm just so I went to Lagos Comic Con over the weekend, and when you see the amount of like comic books, everybody has their different styles, right? It's still relatively small, right? The comic book industry is still relatively small, right? But it's huger than the game industry, right? So what excites me is just how much can be done, right? When we start to see more and more games. So, for example, Reloaded, a very popular a game came out published by with Unreal and everything, and Epic Games came out, has a demo come out recently. Just the possibility of that happening is pretty exciting for me. And I'll say the second part is the amount of competition, right? You don't want one person dominating the whole scene. You want competition, right? And that's what we do at Maliyo Games, right? Once there's competition, you get more good products, and we can only see that already in the Western market, right? Everybody's fighting back and front, right? And you're getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, right? And we have to also be there also. So that's kind of like the way I see it at the moment. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Michael, for your time. That was an amazing talk. Thanks for covering Safari City as well as addressing the questions that we have gotten.
Yeah. All right. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Dorothy. All right.
Okay, we're going to quickly jump ship and move on to the next phase of the meetup today. And we have Nicole Gesare, who will be showcasing the Merge minigame that she created together with her team under the GameUp Africa Elite program, which is an externship program for our outstanding GameUp Africa graduates who have gone through the bootcamp before and performed really well. So they've come back to learn how to work in better performing teams. Nicole is a creator at the intersection of engineering, design, and storytelling. Currently, she's a third-year mechatronic engineering student in Kenya and a certified game developer through the GameUp Africa program. She participated in last year's cohort. Currently, she's under the Elite program, where she's sharpening her skills in game development in Unity and practicing how to work efficiently in teams. She built the Merge minigame with her team, which has now been launched in Safari City, which you can easily test and play out both on App Store and Play Store. Welcome, Nicole.
Hi, Dorothy. Thank you for the introduction. Hello, everyone. So for today, I'll be presenting the Merge minigame that has been recently added to Safari City, as Dorothy has mentioned. And that was a really good introduction, so I'm just going to mention a few things. I'm an alumni of the GameUp Africa program, and currently as the Elite program with a focus on game programming. So we've been mainly working on rapid prototyping of games and a general production experience in teams. And if you want more information on me, there's a portfolio QR code over there. You can scan either right now or later on when you rewatch the video. So this was the first version of the magic. And
Nicole, you can reduce the volume of the video. It's overpowering your voice.
Okay. Just a minute.
Or let the video play fast and then you can speak after if it's not possible to reduce the volume.
So that was the first version of the game. And this is what has been put in Safari City. So if by any chance you've played the game recently and you've gotten a pop-up to play the mini game, this is how it looks like. And okay, so the gameplay, as you have seen, involves merging two fruits to proceed to another higher tier of fruit. So you're given an objective fruit to get after merging the fruits. So you need to work with the time limit to ensure you get the objective fruit before the time ends, and then you earn the keys. So like in this one, the objective fruit is here, and after merging the fruits, you will get to this tier and win the game pretty much. For the reason that Safari City considered adding mini games was to, in the context of play engagement, this is a retention strategy to break monotony of match 3 gameplay, because the loop is you play the match 3 game and keys, renovate, play the match 3, and that is the loop that's there. And the mini games are just to break that monotony and just a quick way to earn the keys and continue with the gameplay. So because it's a quick play option, it's more interesting to actually play, have a mini game into the game, instead of maybe you don't have a life anymore in the game and you have the option to play the mini game, you'll still get the keys and continue playing. So the type of game is also different from what's already there. So it appeals to a different player preference, and also it's a monetization opportunity because of additional engagement points and reward parts. Yeah. So the development process and approach was that we had a sprint-based development. So what that means was we had to pitch the ideas, and after that we got feedback, which we incorporated into the planning phase. And then after planning, we organized the work using platforms like Hack and Plan, which Micheal had mentioned, a number of project management tools, because you can't just jump into a project without proper planning for effective and quick way to complete a project. The way of also approaching the development was we had a collaborative environment where I've already mentioned that we were working in teams, and we could also consult from the Maliyo team and had mentors through this process, and had sessions where we had to get feedback and iterate on some of the features, or if you're stuck somewhere, you could consult either a teammate or another person in the elite program or any other person in the team. So we had to adapt quickly to any challenge that we faced. So it was, because it's a sprint-based development, we had 2 weeks to maybe work on a new feature or work on several features. So immediately you get feedback and consult. You had to quickly adapt to those challenges and make the appropriate corrections. So the technical side of it, we had to use Unity 6, which was compatible to what had already been used during the building phase. And because the game had already been developed, this was just something that they were plugging into the already built game. So we had to use Unity 6. And also, we also had to ensure that there was a transition from desktop to mobile first design, because during the pitching phase, I had made a desktop first design. So because the users are using the mobile phones and the game is a mobile game, we had to transition to that. And also an input system implementation for the touch controls because it's a mobile game. And the art and design bits. So these were the initial sprites in the initial art style in the first phase of the game. And then eventually we transitioned to this. And also the background, it was a bit dull. So we had to switch to something more colorful to look at and more appealing to look at. And also the pop-up where you get to play the mini game evolved from this to this. And that was pretty much the art evolution. There was also the visual effects, the popping sounds. Those are also some things we had to add during the development. And then for the core gameplay mechanics, we have the merge logic, being that this is a merge mini game. You merge two similar fruits to evolve to the next tier of fruits. And we had an 11-tier evolution system. So depending on the objective fruit you've gotten, you have to merge them in a certain order to get to a certain fruit. And for the control bit, as I'd mentioned, you tap to drop the fruit where you want the fruit to merge. So let me just go back to the video. So if you tap at different points, the fruit will drop at that point. Yeah. So that was one of the things we had to look at, and also a win or lose condition. So winning, you reach the target fruit tier, and losing, the time ends. And also for the development journey and challenges. So as I mentioned again, we had to work in sprints. So like for week 1, we had to maybe focus on sprint extraction or visual integration, like switching the assets to what Safari City already had. For week 2, it was the core gameplay implementation and fixing bugs, and also ensuring the what we've made can be plugged into the actual game. And then we had a different sprint where we had to fix a bit on the mobile controls and the touch system, because the game was really lagging a lot. And the last thing was the audio and visual polish, and then creating the final build. So the challenge we faced was the freezing of the game through the second playthrough. So we had to fix the state management to ensure that there's no freeze depending on the device someone is using, because some devices the game was working, then in others there was a bit of a freeze or the game wasn't working at all. So playtesting is very important. So that's how we noticed that there was this challenge, and we were able to fix it in the second sprint. So the problem solving approach was we had to do like a system debugging and state reset implementation, and then ensure that since we are working in a team, the changes we make are merged correctly so that we don't break the game. Yeah. For the team, I was working with 2 teammates, Mohammed and Ino. So Mohammed was in charge of gameplay mechanics and the build, and Ino was in charge of the visual and audio design and the gameplay music. These are their socials. You can have screenshot them and maybe have a look at them later. And also, I was the original idea girl, whichever, and the team coordinator, so managing the hack and plan tasks, splitting tasks, and ensuring that the game was developed within the time we were given, and the game design as well, and developing the mechanics in the first sprint before the modifications were done. Yes, so you can definitely install Safari City and check out the mini game. And yeah, thank you. Open to questions. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you, Nicole, for participating, for creating, and also for sharing your experience. Do we have any questions for Nicole? Hadi says, awesome work on the mini game.
Thank you.
All right, Nicole, as we wait for questions, you have developed games before, especially as part of GameUp Africa and on your own. What do you think are the biggest lessons for you collaborating with others versus working alone?
So normally I've been working alone for the other games I have done, except for the projects we had for the GameUp Africa. That one I had a team, but during this period, it's been more of working alone. And my takeaway from working in teams is that everyone has their own strengths, and we should leverage on those strengths instead of trying to do everything all at once. There are communities available, even for the, let's say, for the alumni or in from the GameUp Africa boot camp. There's a Discord for the elite team. We'll also have each other, like, even after this. And there's also reaching out to people directly to consult and ask. So that has been a really major takeaway, because the process was really fast. Correcting some issues was really fast. Maybe something I would have struggled with because I had a team. It was a faster development phase with less challenges than what I would have normally faced. Yeah.
All right, great. You were the original, the idea was originally yours, and having created it and then having it modified and improved to get into the game, that now people can actually get to play it. How do you see this mini game contributing to the Safari City player experience?
Okay. I felt the idea was really good because we are using fruits, and already from the match 3 setup, the fruits are already part of the Safari City setting. So something that is complementing the game and still using the elements that have already been used. So because it's being a mini game, it's not always going to be there. So it's just part of player retention, something that excites you to try out, or just a quick play session that you can be able to earn your keys instead of the typical match 3 session that you have in between the innovation phases of the game. So in the context of retention, and also it's a fun short play. I guess that's the main. Yeah.
All right, thanks, Nicole. Having participated in GameUp Africa and now Elite, what's your view in programs like GameUp Africa on shaping the next generation of game developers in Africa?
So, okay, I think Maliyo has been one of the biggest supporters for game developers because of the training, which is free, and the support system that's there, because you get to work with mentors. I think there's also this the sessions that we have, the monthly meetups, to learn from the team even after maybe we've left the program, and a community you can reach out to even after you've completed the boot camp. So I feel that the program has been quite has a lot of impact on us as game developers. And apart from self-taught game developers, I think this is one of the major programs that enables us to learn and learn in the best way possible, not just even though it's a rushed boot camp, there's an efficient way of learning and culture of doing projects that maybe typically someone wouldn't have done, like the project management style using Hack and Plan if you're working in a team, the flowcharts overview when you're doing the game design, and even the pitching bit of things. So I believe that this has been a really good experience. And also for the elite program, it's really good that you have involved the alumni as well, because we've gotten to maybe work with each other again for those who are in the same cohort. And we've gotten to work on a game, Safari City, which is already out there in the market and people are actively playing it. So it has been quite impactful. Yeah.
Okay. Great to hear that you've had a great time, and thanks for sharing that as well. Sean is asking, from a developer perspective, right? What do you normally do for SFX and music? Where do you get the assets?
Okay, for SFX and music, there are quite a lot of assets on even Unity assets that are free. So for what we had was actually from the Unity assets, and also even including the SFX actually. But I can share a link can I share a link afterwards for?
Yeah, I believe Sean is in the GameUp Africa program bootcamp this year. So feel free to share on the resources channel on Discord.
I can share another site where they had more of SFX, because for Unity assets, they have really long clips that you have to like maybe cut out some sections, or which is a bit tedious for maybe a beginner or someone who doesn't normally work with audio. So I'll share another link as well in the resources section. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Do we have any other questions for Nicole? If none, thank you so much, Nicole, for sharing your experience in GameUp Africa Elite and also on working on the Marge minigame. Congratulations to you and your team for making such an awesome game that it made an appearance in Safari City. Maybe we can take this last question from Glenn. Speaking of the bootcamp, what did you make for the game jam and how was the experience?
Okay, for the bootcamp, generally I was really having a rough time because I hadn't done a lot of programming. So I chose a really simple game inspired by Flappy Bird, for those who've played Flappy Bird. And then I implemented a different storyline. Okay, so it was more of a jet flying through obstacles. Yes. I wanted to work with something simple so that I could complete it with the time we had with my teammates, and so that I also understand what I'm doing in the process. Yeah. Yes.
All right, and that's a very good perspective on scoping as well, because it's just 7 days for the game jam, and if you're able to scope yourself out well, then you know what you can do and how you can deliver. As Michael was saying earlier, you need to deliver a game that is at least 50% polished for a game jam. So make sure you're delivering a game that is very well executed, very simple, and it still has good polish. All right, thank you so much, Nicole, for your time. Before we conclude, we're running the GameUp Africa program this year for the 5th time. And we've closed applications on our Unity applications, audio and art program, but our applications for Godot are still open. So if you're here on the call and you're interested in learning how to make games with Godot, or you know somebody in your university or in your environment, in your club, in your association, that will be interested in joining the 5th edition of GameUp Africa, encourage them to apply. So they can go to our website, www.gameupafrica.com. The application link is still live for Godot, and ask them to apply. Our deadline will be the end of November, actually. So by 28th October, I mean. So by 28th October, we'll close the applications for Godot. If you know anyone who's interested, then direct them to this. It's a very awesome community to get to also know other people within the continent that are making games and that are curious about what you are also learning. So you find people working in Unity, find people working in audio, find people working in art. And at the time when you want to do a game jam or you want to make a game, it's easy to find people that you can collaborate with. What did you think about this event? Please let us know. Scan the code, the QR code on screen. I'm also going to share a link on the chat. It's a quick feedback form, less than 2 minutes. Let us know what you think. And if you have any companies or people of interest that you'd like us to invite to these meetups, then let us know so that we can try to invite them to the other meetups before we close the year. I'm going to leave this running for a couple of minutes so that you have time to scan the code, and then we will conclude. Okay, bye everyone. This was lovely. Thanks for joining us for the September meetup. We'll see you again on the 16th of October with yet another amazing speaker and a showcase. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye-bye.